You good? Namaste and welcome, everyone. I'm David Martin. Have the amazing honor today of being your MC for this celebration of life for our beloved friend, Barry Heermann. So, I live in Monterey, California. I'm on the Pacific coast, about 2 hours south of Santa Cruz. So when I met Barry, we discovered that we both enjoyed the going to spiritual retreats at the Hermitage, in the Camaldolese Hermitage south of Monterey, and the Big Sur Coast, the Camaldolese Hermitage. And that was at our first meeting, and we became close friends after that, and within a short period of time, Barry became my best friend, my spiritual mentor, and my brother, really. And I think those three descriptors, brother and good friend and spiritual mentors, are descriptors that I probably share with a lot of you here today. So thank you for coming. So our time together today has been choreographed by Kipra with Barry's requests and guidance, and with the open hearts and helping hands of many friends and neighbors. So first, just to give you a little overview, first I want to share a little bit about Barry's life with you. Then we'll hear from three of Barry's colleagues who represent three periods of his professional life: Sinclair College, his team spirit work with corporations, and his noble purpose programs for churches and schools. And then after that, we'll hear from Barry's beloved daughter, Jennifer, and the love of his life and wife for 30 years, Kipra. And then following them we'll hear from the next generation, Barry's granddaughters, Corinne and Olivia. In his 30s, shortly after his beloved mother's death, Barry had a mystical experience. It left him feeling at one with everyone and everything in the universe, and confident in the essential goodness of life's unfoldment. That experience inspired him to help others to find greater passion, purpose, and fulfillment in their lives. Professionally, Barry was an educator, organizational development consultant, and the author of 7 books. He trained over 450 senior executives around the world to develop enthusiastic, high-performance teams. He worked with hundreds of churches, schools, and higher education institutions to help their leaders ignite greater passion for life and work in their constituents. In his early years, he led a program at Sinclair College that became a national model for adult experiential learning. And subsequently, he was the dean and then a faculty member for the Union Institute and University for nearly 15 years. If you knew Barry Heermann, he loved you. That was his greatest gift. He recognized, affirmed, and celebrated the goodness and special qualities of everyone in his life. He listened with compassion, non-judgment, and encouragement to the myriad of people that confided in him. Barry laughed a lot. He loved cars and jazz too, but mostly he was in love with humanity. Barry was a deeply spiritual man. He engaged in personal retreats, meditation, contemplation, and journaling for decades. He drew his personal theology and philosophy from a wide variety of religious and spiritual traditions. Barry lived with Parkinson's disease for the last 10 years of his life. He regarded Parkinson's as an opportunity for spiritual growth and an ever closer relationship with the divine. Barry passed away on August 14th. He was 77. Parkinson's did not get the best of Barry. We did. We'll now hear from Barry's colleagues and family.
I represent the earliest period of Barry's career. Barry's body is gone, but not his spirit. His voice is gone, but not his message. His brain is gone, but not his ideas. His heart is gone, but not his love. Never, ever his love. It seems with so much that he's left, we shouldn't be grieving, but we are. Still, for now, that's appropriate. Recently, at my lifelong friend's memorial service for her brother, she quoted WandaVision and said, "What is grief, if not love persevering?" And memories of Barry are persevering too. When Kipra called and said, and she said she wasn't surprised at this at all, that Barry had planned his own memorial service, and told me I was supposed to speak. I sort of got this, I was on the phone, but I got a deer in the headlight look. I really did. It was like, no. And I said, well, what am I supposed to say? And Kipper said, Barry said you'd know what to say. At that point, after the initial shock, I actually laughed because it was so like Barry. He always had more faith in other people and in me than I had in myself. Always. So it was an appropriate thing for him to decide to do. Still, all I could think was, Barry, I don't know what to say. But I started thinking, and I realized that Barry knew how much I thought of him, how much I appreciated everything that he had done for me. And he knew that I was pretty representative of all the other students and colleagues that he worked with. And so I realized that he wanted me to say the same things that they've said and would say if they were standing up here. So that helped some. So I'm going to try to do that. My name is Brenda Wilson, and I met Barry in 1971 when I was a first-term, 20-year-old marketing major at Sinclair Community College, and Barry was chair of the marketing department. I was there with an 18-month-old son in the middle of a divorce, and I had saved just enough money to get through one term of college as long as I didn't do something foolish like eat lunch. So, getting involved in extracurriculars was not high on my priority list. I had enough things to do. I had to find a part-time job, et cetera, et cetera. But I had a friend named Pete D'Onofrio, and Pete was an Army veteran. It was the Vietnam era, and he was from the Bronx. So Pete was not prone to hyperbole or a lot of emotional kinds of effusions. But he said that I absolutely had to meet this guy named Barry Heermann, and that they were starting a marketing club, and I should come to the meeting. Well, as I said, I couldn't eat lunch and they were serving food, so I went. And what I noticed, more than Barry as a person, was the reaction of the people in the room to Barry. They were more open, they were more relaxed, they were more effusive, they said more, they opened up more, and they also seemed to be totally sure that they were going to be appreciated. Well, by the end of that meeting, I came out the brand new president of the marketing club. but it was a blessing. It was a blessing because I really got to know Barry as we started to build things with this club. And because I'd gotten to know Barry, and because the members of the marketing club always met in his office, one day before we started our meeting, I was telling this group about a sales presentation I was going to do for Professor Jerry Kinski's Principles of Salesmanship class. And it just so happened that I had a friend named Vicki Seelig, who was a theater major and was starring in a production of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And Vicki was playing a courtesan, and her role was to lie on her side, and 4 Romans carried her in while she sang, "I've got what you want, I've got what you need." Well, in marketing, we were always told, customer needs, customer wants, and so that turned, into my sales presentation. And we were talking about it, and out of nowhere, Barry said, "I want to be the customer." Okay. So we started working on all this. We didn't really rehearse, but Barry did call Jerry Kinski's wife and invite her to come watch the presentation. So when Jerry walked in the room, he was a little bit suspicious. But Barry waited out in the hall. And while he was out there, he turned his suit coat inside out. He turned his glasses upside down. He ruffled his hair. And he came in, hunched over, sort of peeking at everybody, up over his glasses, like the original nerd. And he stood there for a minute, and they carried Vicki in, singing her song, and put her on the desk. And then it was my job to feature benefit. So, Barry sniffed behind Vicky's ear and said, "My, oh my." And then at the very end, it was my role to come up with, if any of you have had sales classes, you don't give a no option. You give 2 yes options. So I said, "Would you like to be with this lady on Friday or Saturday?" And Barry goes, "Could I have both?" Anyway, so I got to know Barry pretty well during that time. And it was a time when I really wasn't looking forward to graduating, but I did. And I went on to the University of Dayton. And over there, I sort of drifted back to my original passion, which was journalism. And a few years later, I was working for the Sydney Daily News. And it was, I was on the path I thought I belonged on and everything. And on a Saturday afternoon, I got a call from Barry. And he said, "I've gotten a little bit of money, and it's my chance to start a program that I've always wanted to do. It's called experience-based education." And he said, "The money only lasts for a year, so I can't promise you anything beyond a year." A couple of days later, I went to the editor and said that I was leaving my job. He asked me if it was a matter of money, and how could I tell him? No, it just felt right, and it seemed like this would be a whole lot more fun. So anyway, that's how I started working with Barry at EBE. When I got to this part of it, I thought, how do I describe 15 years or so of a program that just went wild? And what finally, I just kept thinking and thinking, and I was totally stymied. But then something really strange happened. I mean, this is really, really strange. I've been at a number of universities, and I've saved everything I've ever written. And, I was a journalist. I've got a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of stuff. And even the pandemic wasn't enough to help me get it organized. So I was looking for something totally unrelated and found this little folder that said, EBE, the early years. And in it, I found a memo that Barry wrote to us at the end of our first year of experience-based education. And it was my outline. It told me exactly what to say. So the memo was dated June 14th, 1977, and some of the people that it was written to are in the room now. It began, "To Bob, Brenda, Carolyn, Cheryl, Gordon, Liz, Millie, Paul, and Sandy." And you'll notice, I did right away, that he put us in alphabetical order because he didn't want any of us to feel like, he wanted to make sure that it was equal, that he loved us all equally. Okay. What he said, and I quote, "This past year has been most memorable for me. I have a deep sense of satisfaction about what we have, quote, pulled off, unquote. I guess more importantly than pulling something off is the something, the affirmation of student learning from work and other life experiences." And Barry was, as usual, right. It's amazing that we pulled it off. Every professor, and I suspect there may be a lot of you in here, or people that have done workshops or whatever, knows the feeling of being one chapter ahead of the students when he or she hasn't been given much warning and suddenly was plopped down in front of the class. Well, literally, we were writing the chapter 1 week ahead of giving it to the students. It was really, I can't believe what we did and what risks we took, but it worked. Barry went on, "This past year has been wonderful, but it has been trying and stressful too. The time I enjoyed at the beginning of the year, chit-chatting, seemed to all but vanish by winter quarter." And that's true. It became extremely intense. And Barry's mind was always working. And if he didn't have time to share conversations, he wrote things down. And he wrote things down on whatever was handy. So I used to get notes from him on styrofoam cups. And the most memorable, true story, is his muse, his secretary, his office manager, Evie Dara, got a whole presentation proposal to type up written on a roll of toilet paper. True story. Okay. It was also really interesting that Barry's, I don't know if anybody's read Barry's handwriting, but one of our frequent activities around the office was getting in a little huddle and trying to decide what that note said, voting on what do you think that word is, and so forth. So anyway, Barry went on to say, I'm convinced that we need our out-of-town trips to revitalize ourselves. And those trips really were important because they made the unbelievably long hours and the emotionally intense work that we were doing, working with human beings that were, exploring their lives and delving deep into themselves, bearable. They also, involved teaching and learning and all those kinds of things, but most of all, I remember the laughter. We were so young. I mean, we were really young at that point. And so we played like the kids we were, and Barry was usually the instigator. For instance, because we had no funds, we would have one room for the women and one room for the men. And in one of the early trips, Barry came down and he had some hard candy to give to the ladies, because there was no mint on the pillow and all this. And we thought, isn't that sweet? Well, we found out Barry had sabotaged our bathroom. He had put toothpaste on the toilet. He had unscrewed all of the caps on all of our products. It was a disaster. but anyway, and in the memo, Barry went on to say, my own personal and professional goals hinge on change. I want for myself, for my family, for loved ones, for institutions, and for students, the possibility of growth and change. Reading Barry's words 44 years later, I realized that I shouldn't have been surprised when Barry left Sinclair. He had to move on. During one of our group trips, 5 of us were stranded at O'Hare Airport for the entire night. It was miserable. We were with 1,000 other people, and we were sitting on the floor. And at some point in the middle of the night, Barry handed me a book that he had just finished and said, you might want to read this. And I would have read anything at that point. I mean, I was so bored. But it was Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And a lot of you will know that book. It's the story of a bird who pushed his limits and then taught others to do the same. At the end of that book, Jonathan's student, a gull named Fletcher, is talking with Jonathan. Fletcher turned to his instructor, and there was a moment of fright in his eye. Me leading? You're the instructor here. You couldn't leave. Couldn't I? Don't you think there might be other flocks, other Fletchers, that need an instructor more than this one? I didn't know then, and I don't know why I'm surprised now that Barry had to leave Sinclair. I don't know why I'm surprised that he's left us now. He was needed elsewhere with another flock. There's one more important message in Barry's memo, and I absolutely know that he wrote this for everybody here, not just those of us who were listed on that memo. Barry said, each of you is unique, committed, insightful, resourceful, and special in your own way. You are important to me. And I know he felt that. And I'm really honored that I got to know him. Kimbra has one other story from a trip that Barry and a lot of the experience-based education staff took that for some reason I wasn't on. But it was a favorite story that involves Gordon Cobrathwaite and Carolyn Mann and some other folks, especially one dear, dear departed friend named Mary Alice Geiselhart. And I would be glad to read this, but I see Carolyn's here, and I don't know if she'd like to talk about it later. It's the Black's Beach story. Do you want to tell that a little later?
I can do that.
Okay, all right. And so thank you very much, and thank you for sharing Barry with us all these years.
Grace and peace to you. I'm going to throw away my papers here. Barry lived to be 77 years old. He was a noble man with a noble purpose. He could be very serious, but he also loved to laugh. Here's an example of a joke we shared the last time we were together. What's the difference between a steel-belted radial tire made in Akron, Ohio, and 365 used condoms? One is a good year, the other a really great year. By almost every measure, Barry had a lot of great years in his life. As Abraham Lincoln said, though, in the end, it's not the years in your life that count. It's the life in your years. And that was certainly true for Barry. But I would tell you that for Barry, it was more about the love in his years. Barry genuinely loved people, and he loved helping them reach their potential. Like the tagline of his book, Noble Purpose, Igniting Extraordinary Passion for Life and Work, Barry had a passion for life, people, and service. He always strived to make a positive difference, and so he did. Barry made a tremendous difference in my life and in the lives of so many. We met 25 years ago in Dayton, Ohio, when I was working at NCR Corporation. The company was going through some very difficult times, and I was part of the leadership group that was brought in to help turn things around. It was probably one of the most gut-wrenching experiences of my life, and Barry was there to assist and help me keep things in perspective. His team spirit model provided a wonderful framework for teams to mature and become high-performing very quickly. Barry taught this model to hundreds of executives over the years, and in so doing, he made their workplaces better for everyone involved. Barry taught me many, many things, and for this I will be eternally grateful. And as I reflected on what I learned from Barry, I just got the sense that there are 3 things he would like me to pass on to you. And they are: 1, live intentionally; 2, leaders model the way; and 3, nurture friendships. Number 1, live intentionally. Barry challenged me to live intentionally in the moment, every moment. He taught me how to be fully present in the moment, how to make the most of each moment. Barry had this great way of slowing things down. Chaos may be swirling around, but he was able to slow things down, make space so people could be heard, and to help the group think more clearly in the moment. I can still see his smile, often childlike, his sense of wonder, somewhat mischievous or playful, and I remembered how his blue eyes would light up in surprise or curiosity when someone would say something in a group setting. My favorite was the look he often gave during coaching or facilitation sessions, a look of amused bewilderment. This helped him foster safe environments where people were encouraged to tell their truth. He always seemed to listen deeply without judging, always asking, "What else do you need to say? How can I support you?" Barry believed the universe is unfolding as it should, and I think this helped calm his demeanor. We don't always know what the future holds, but the best thing about the future is it comes one day at a time. And he believed we can help shape the future, if we have the courage to act on the strength of our convictions. Live intentionally. Change comes from within. Life is what you make it, and you should live life without regret. Number 2, Barry always told me, leaders model the way. And he certainly modeled the way to lead. He chose to lead as a servant leader with a loving spirit. He encouraged me and other leaders to do the same. Barry believed in the goodness of humanity and people's desire to do good. He believed in the power of helping people find purpose and meaning in their work. Park your ego at the door, he'd say. Be willing to share the responsibility of leadership. Hire people smarter than you. Give them the opportunities and let them soar. He taught me how to deliver tough news. Do it in a kind way, he said. Always be genuine, be authentic, be direct so people don't miss your message, but always try to say it with the spirit of love in which you intend. Fear is counterproductive. Love always wins. Number 3, nurture friendships. I think the best part of one's life often comes from friendships. Barry provided a good example of how to nurture friendships. Part of that was being able to listen without judgment, and another part of that was always willing to be of service. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Give out of love, expect nothing in return, and that's grace in action. That's a sign of true friendship. Part of living intentionally is taking the time to nurture friendships. I last saw Barry as part of his 75th birthday celebration. With Kipper's help, we were able to surprise him while he was house sitting in Santa Barbara. We enjoyed a wonderful morning together, consistent with every other interaction I have ever had with Barry. It was pleasant, he was very engaged, thoughtful, filled with laughter, and very provocative. He made me better, or at least tried to make me better, in every encounter. In closing, I would encourage you to do the following in Barry's honor. 1, live your life intentionally without regret. 2, reflect on all those people that have made a positive impact on your life. Proactively reach out to them and thank them for their friendship. Be sure your friends know they are loved and encourage them to continue to make a difference in the lives of others. Take time to do the inner work to know yourself, speak your truth, live out your noble purpose. You and the world will be better for it. Barry, we love you. We will always love you. And we feel blessed to have been loved by you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I guess I represent the most recent professional era of Barry's life. My name is Toni Moore, and I've been an educator for 50 years. One of the things that I did when Kipra called and asked me to speak was sit down as a dutiful teacher with a pencil and paper and started to list all the wonderful qualities of Barry. He was open to everyone. He exemplified hospitality, curiosity, joy. He celebrated everyone. He was so empathetic. I thought, well, this isn't going anywhere. We all know that about Barry. So then I thought of Barry's words to me. Let the universe take care of it. Don't worry. And so I decided I would. And I had the brilliant notion, and I was sure Barry sent it, that I would focus my remarks on how do you catch a butterfly? So I started to think of all these wonderful qualities, and they all fit. And then I thought, but he wasn't really just a butterfly, because Barry could also be fiercely focused and determined, driven to a goal, calmly tenacious, loyal, purposeful in everything he did. Barry was someone who, as he discovered and began to love you, you began to discover more about yourself, even things that you never would have dreamed of. He had a way of pulling it out of us, of letting us and encouraging us to say the most outrageous things, what our most outrageous dreams and expectations were. Not many people can do that. Barry lived life full out. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, how do I talk about it? And I came across something that I want to share with you. It's one of, it's one of my favorite photos of Barry. Laughing, true joy. I'm I'm going to just pass this around and let you take a look. I hope you feel the joy in it that I did, and that's what kind of got me started in figuring out what to say. So I met Barry in a serendipitous way, as I'm sure many of you have. It was on the recommendation and urging of people in my life from different aspects of my life. I'd written a dissertation on spirituality and the development of spirit, and they said, you've got to meet this guy, Barry Heermann. And I was like, I was hearing it from people at school, I was hearing it from other friends, and I was like, who is this guy, Barry Heermann? So I took the initial Noble Purpose program, and I think Jim Stewart was the facilitator. But to get me started, Barry drove over to my home to drop off my book, and I thought, who is this big shot that comes and drops a book at my little house? But he did, and I was just fascinated with the work and the way he gave us a gate to open into ourselves, a way to really tap into the deepest part of yourself. So at first, I was a little bit skeptical, I guess you would say, because who was this guy who was so generous, so kind, so wonderful? And I called one of the friends I had and said, is he for real? I mean, is this something I should get mixed up in? And my friend said, oh yes, he really is. He's a true spiritual seeker. He's very authentic. Well, that sold me right then and there. So I called Barry and told him that I'd been given a grant to create a professional development program for Catholic school educators. Now, if you know anything about teachers, you know that sometimes they're a little resistant to being told. I mean, we, as teachers, we would go to a math workshop, or we would go to a reading workshop, and we would go to a retreat. They were like different things. But I felt there needed to be something holistic, and I thought, you know what? Barry Heermann's work is exactly what we need. So I called Barry in California, and I said, could you do this on the telephone with our people? And he said, well, actually, we're moving back to Ohio. I could not, it was the stars were lined up for sure. So we started this program called the St. Remy Initiative, and it was professional and leadership development as well as personal development for teachers. And it was development in the faith. So we were trying to get at the real missionary aspect of why people do what they do. So we had this wonderful program. Barry enthusiastically jumped on board, sharing all his knowledge and skills. We adopted the Noble Purpose book as a framework. We had speakers. It was a big time. And, you know, Barry patiently taught the spiral, if you're all familiar with the spiral, of growth and leading to service. And he taught it, and he taught it, and we all did this. And some of the teachers were a little uncomfortable, you know, having to be as vulnerable as he encouraged them to be. So he taught about the spiral, and frankly, even though I had taken the course, I wasn't totally sure what all the spiral was anyway. I was running from room to room trying to get everyone organized. And so after about the second year, he said, we need feedback from people. And he said, I'd like to be out of the room while you ask all these teachers and principals what they really think of Noble Purpose. Okay, so he was out of the room. I was asking, people were saying nice, polite things, as teachers tend to like to do in public. And all of a sudden, one teacher stood up and she really spoke the truth. She said, you know, actually, I'm getting a little spiraled out. And I said, what? And I was thinking to myself, I don't even know all the parts of the spiral yet, and you're spiraled out. So, but I tell that story because that teacher is still with the program. The program exists today. It's in its 15th year. She's on the leadership team. She was totally sold, but that's how Barry was. he did more than teach us about what he knew intellectually and what he knew in his heart. He taught it by who he was. So he stayed the course with us longer and longer. We did other assessments, and we got to the point where people just gave us their feedback without even being asked, which was pretty cool, I thought. And he also, another thing we did were called fireside chats. So he and I would sit at a table. It was like you were being crucified. You know, they could say anything they wanted to you about the program. They could criticize it, and you'd nod and smile, as only Barry did. And so we were doing one of our fireside chats, and I said, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do, Barry?" And he said, "It'll be fine. Just let the universe have it, and it'll all turn out great." So we did. And one of the most memorable comments I ever heard came out of one of our fireside chats. One of the principals stood up and she said to Barry and me, she said, "You know, this was your program, but you know what? It's our program now." And he had cultivated this sense of ownership and involvement that was just unmatched to anything that I'd ever seen before. So it was pretty amazing. Another thing I wanted to share with you, this is just a little story. One Christmas, as we heard some outrageous stories about Barry, even recently he's been outrageous. It was just like a week before our Christmas meeting with these teachers, and he said, "Could you order me an elf suit?" And I said, "An elf suit?" He always wanted to make everything grander and more wonderful. And I'm like, we have to sign everybody up, get everything lined up, and you want an elf suit. But I wish I could show you the video, because I came across that yesterday of Barry in the elf suit and Kipra videotaping him coming out from the corner and giggling and laughing, and I'm sure you can all hear him yourselves right now. So he stayed with us, and I guess just historically, we had the St. Remy Initiative, and then we were fortunate enough to get other funding for a leadership institute for principals, and so he helped us form that, and he shared so generously with so many of you. I see so many of you here that visited our meetings and spoke to our teachers and principals and opened a whole new world to them. But Barry never hesitated, and he'd say, "Oh, I'll call that person. Peter Block, no problem. Let me just call him." Be like, wow, amazing and generous for sure. So the last thing that I just wanted to tell you is that I was telling a friend of mine how difficult this was going to be to try to capture Barry, because who captures Barry, right? And she sent me an essay called "The Trapeze." I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's an essay in which someone says, "I feel like my life is swinging on a trapeze. And I grab the handles and I swing through the air, and after a while it becomes very comfortable. First I'm afraid, but then I swing joyfully, and I feel I actually have control of the trapeze. And yes, just while I'm enjoying myself, a new trapeze comes into view, and it has my name on it. And so I feel like I should reach out and grab it, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'll fall into the abyss. So I think I may stay here on this safe trapeze. But if you grab it, and anytime you grab the next trapeze, you swing to a new height, and you see new things and learn new things about yourself, and you give yourself permission to change. And to me, that's how Barry was. He welcomed every new trapeze that swung his way, no matter how outrageous, no matter how crazy. He always accepted it joyfully. And even to this last era where he had some illness and had Parkinson's, I was amazed at this man who openly, with arms outstretched, accepted that disease, and again grabbed a new trapeze and became not only all he could be to those he loved, but an example to people everywhere. So I just wanted to tell you about that, because I think Barry's eyes would be sparkling, and he would just tell us all today just let the universe take care of it.
Hello, I'm Emily Seibel, and I thought I'd start with a Quaker proverb that Barry liked to quote, which is, "Blessed are the vulnerable, for they shall be broken, and being so shall break open the heart of the universe." I think about that a lot. Barry's greatest wish for all of us is that we truly listen to ourselves. You really listen. In the foreword to his Noble Purpose Practice book, he thanks his coaches and mentors, Bob Ross, Tony Stone, and David Grudermeyer, for their brilliant support of him. And today it is my turn. So more than 10 years ago, I was 28, and I was in a room in the Methodist Church here in Yellow Springs, sitting around a conference table, and the board of the organization I worked for, Yellow Springs Home Inc., offered me the role to be the executive director. And I remember saying, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm 28. This is crazy. And I said, I'll do this on one condition. And I made eye contact with everybody around that table, and Barry was one of those people. And I said, I'm only going to do this if we are all in this together, and I mean it. Because I have no idea what I'm doing. And he said that day, I will coach you. So that was over 10 years ago. And I remember at our very first coaching session, I was looking through my old journals from 2011, 2012 this morning. And during our very first phone call, I just remember being so overwhelmed, and I was just standing there and just tears were running down my face. And I said, Barry, and he had this piercing through. I mean, just right through. You don't even realize how bounded you are. He'd like to talk about the bounded self. But he would get right into that essential you and pull it out just with the loving presence that he brought to you. It was, I think you might call it ruthless compassion. So I was crying, and I said, I am just worried about being a good person. I just want to be good enough. And I mean, I was having this deep, crisis of the soul moment, and he laughed at me. In his way, in that really lovely Barry way where he's chuckling. And I knew in that moment that we were on to something transformational. Because I also laugh when I hear the truth. And he talks about Mary Oliver's Wild Geese poem, you do not have to be good. I mean, that's kind of one of the whole points of the Noble Purpose Spiral, is that you don't have to be good because, as they say at the Landmark Forum, another one of his joys, you are whole and perfect and complete just as you are. So I'm going to try to channel Barry a little bit. I found this article. I was saving it for today. I'd never read it before, but I've had it printed out for a while. He wrote this for the Science of Mind magazine in June of 2005. So here's the intro by Barry Heermann. Your purpose seeks consciousness over and over again in the shadow of the ancient dream of separation. The resulting deep sleep pervades your every cell, and then, unexpectedly, one clear, bright morning you awaken to the inner murmurs of purpose penetrating your twilight, dream state. Your heart opens slowly, imperceptibly. You realize that the light of morning you awaken to is you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the spiral because after some number of years, Barry invited me to these phone calls. And they're called the Noble Purpose Practitioner Community. And David is on these calls. Some of you are in the calls, and then I know people are going to be watching. So I'm trying to bring them into this circle and into this space. So the first part of the Noble Purpose Spiral is initiating, which is really walking through this open door into the fire and crossing the threshold. And that space right on the edge of becoming is where Barry met you. So it's choosing the path and completely surrendering, even if you don't believe it, to belonging and trust, knowing that the universe is perfectly unfolding. You move on to visioning, then to claiming, which is really being your purpose, celebrating, which is a profound gratitude, letting go, releasing the clutching of power and control, and then finally getting to your noble purpose, which is about joy and flow and unconditional love and unity. It's this spaciousness and this loving presence. And if you're trying to get there, you're doing it wrong, because you don't have to try, you're already there. He also brought me to Tara Brach. I know he and Kipra listened maybe weekly to Tara Brach lectures, as do I now. And she likes to say, if you want to show someone that you love them, all you have to do is be present, because the love is already there. So that loving presence is definitely something that he brought me, this whole idea of returning home to love. It's really about embracing the connection that is undeniably here, moving past this sort of false separation. He said that the journey is more like a prayer than a process or a formula. And it's about embracing our wholeness. No, there is no insufficiency, there's no lack, there is nothing missing within you. And he also said, relax. Give yourself a break. This shouldn't be hard. So, I will say that I'm living proof that one person really believing in you and giving that presence to you and meeting you at that threshold and issuing an invitation can change your life completely forever. So, that's it. It's extraordinary. I am beyond grateful for the journey that Barry took me on and that I will continue. In 2012, he asked me, how do you return to your essence? And all there is there's only to return home. And he wrote a little bit about greatness. If I can find this. Okay. He said, greatness is not in more, it is in less. Not less contribution, but less of you as ego and more of you as authentic being, caring and contributing to others. It's devoid of fear, and it's a place of quiet effectiveness, humility, autonomy, and fierce resolve. And Barry was great, and everybody here knows that he was great. He really exemplified this. So I thought I would finish today by just sharing some of the last words that I said to Barry, which is that I see myself more clearly because of the wisdom and presence that we shared. I promise, and I promise all of you too, to soar to new heights and to share the love that Barry brought to me with others, and to to forward that. I will share Barry's light, which continues to shine brightly in my heart and always will, to help others with their confidence, reach their potential, embrace transformation, and live in this love and light in service of a vision of possibility and remarkable contribution beyond anything you've ever seen or dreamed of. So that's like where Barry lived, just past that threshold. So Barry, I love you, and I love all of you, and thank you for the opportunity to just share a little bit of Barry.
Hi, everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jennifer, and I'm one of Barry's daughters. First, I just want to thank everyone for coming today to join in our celebration of Barry's life and the significant contribution he had in each of our lives. I am so tickled to hear all these great stories about his impact in the work he did from his early 20s all the way through. It is incredible to hear it, and I'm very proud. My dear old dad was and will remain to be an amazing man who cared deeply for each of us. He had an unlimited supply of love, compassion, and understanding for everyone. He was and will continue to be my role model. He taught me to be patient, gentle, loving, to assume innocence, and to be present to the magical unfolding of life, that everything is happening just as it should. You know, that wasn't always easy as a kid. You know, it's one thing to hear these when you're in your 20s, another when you're in your teens, and you're thinking, oh no, life is really bad. You know, we are all each conflicted by whatever that thing is that gets us tied up. For me, it was being conflicted with self-doubt, insecurity, and some level of darkness. But my dad, he would always introduce the light, and he would remind me that everything was going to be okay. So, humor me for a moment. I feel I really want to share an illustration of that, but I'm actually going to point to a movie. So this very nature of his is really illustrated in a very potent movie I saw as a kid called Fearless with Jeff Bridges. And those of you that might be familiar, you might recall the scene in the airplane where the plane is going down. So this is a very frightening scene during the movie, and this airplane is in complete distress, as well as all of its the people on the plane. And so here goes Jeff Bridges, his character is walking down the aisle, and he's telling everyone it is going to be all right. Everything is okay. And as he did that, he connected with each person individually as he said it. And so like this movie, what my dad taught me is that fear is not just something to overcome, but it's something to experience. And that by doing so, we connect to our deepest self and to each other. In those moments when we feel completely devastated, when we think the world is over, my dad could look you in your eyes, those sparkling crystal blue eyes, and with complete patience and empathy, say everything is going to be okay. Trust in the universe. Give yourself some grace. Lean in and fully experience it. he would also say that tears is a gift. And that those tears show that we can be open and truly feel. So thank you, Dad, for your values and beliefs, for all the growth and development throughout your life, the insights and the awareness, your spirituality and faith and knowledge. You have taught us so well, and we love you. And now it's up to each of us to continue sharing and being that contribution he created for us and others. So before I close, I'd like to read Saint Francis of Assisi prayer that I actually have on a plaque in my bathroom. And I see it every day and have to remind myself of it every day. This is an old plaque. It used to be in my dad's home when he was a kid. So, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. And Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving that we receive, it is in the pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to external life. Thank you, Dad, for everything you've done, for all of your contributions to us as individuals, for the man that you continue to be consistently throughout his life. I certainly heard a theme. And know that I will love you forever. And may we meet again. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Barry's wife, Kipra, and I'm going to do my best to get through this because he would want me to, and I want to. But just in case, behind me here is my son, the guy with the beard. He's going to help if I need that. And I'm going to tell stories about our family. Barry and I met in a leadership program he was facilitating for NCR 32 years ago. He was an organizational development consultant for corporations, and I worked for the Red Cross. I was in the course, even though I didn't work for NCR, I wiggled my way in there. And he was the best teacher I ever had. Our paths crossed occasionally for the next few years until a chance meeting in Yellow Springs at the Winds Cafe, and we began dating. 2 months after our first date, I shared a challenging situation I was having at work, and Barry told me about the I Ching, an ancient oracle from China that gave you guidance through the elements of enlightenment. Barry considered this book sacred and used it only when he felt the need for spiritual guidance. I thought it sounded a little like reading your horoscope and wasn't putting much stock into it. To get your reading, you throw 3 coins, and the combination of heads and tails directs you to guidance. To begin, you ask a question that you need guidance with, and I ask, what will my relationship with Barry look like in 6 months? And Barry said, no, you're going to ask the question about the problem you're having at work. And I said, well, don't I get to ask the question I want to ask? And he said, but that's not what we talked about. So there was some debate about whether I could ask my question or the question he wanted me to ask, and he was getting very anxious. But I held fast to my question. I threw the coins, and Barry looked up the guidance. He saw the heading, and before telling me what it said, he immediately began backpedaling so fast my head started to spin. And he said things like, you can't always believe what this says. It isn't an exact science, you know. And the answer was union, which was the marriage symbol. And Barry knew it was a done deal at that point. The following month, he asked me to marry him. Barry knew I loved the ocean and swimming, and as a wedding present, he decided he would learn to swim. Even though there had been an incident in his childhood that left him very afraid of water. One of our first family vacations was in San Diego. We were all in the pool, and Barry was sitting on the side, so it was a very big deal for him. He called every fitness center, YMCA in the area, because he was convinced that there was the perfect instructor who would take a gentle approach to teaching him to swim. He finally told me he had found the perfect person. It was a grandmother. She'd been teaching swimming for 40 years, and he knew she was going to be the best. He went to the YMCA, I believe it was in Kettering, and he walked out to the pool and realized he was the only person in the class, and he stayed as far away from the pool as possible because he knew the instructor would probably want to come talk to him in a very gentle way and he could explain his fear of the water. Out walked the swim instructor on the other side of the pool and said at the top of her lungs, "Heermann, in the pool!" She scared him to death. He came home and said, she might have been a grandmother, but she was also a drill sergeant. He learned to swim, and we swam together every day on our honeymoon. Jenny shared with you her wonderful relationship with her dad. When Barry and I married, Jenny was in college. Barry was so proud of her then and always. She was truly her father's daughter. Jenny took care of Barry for a week last July. Barry loved every minute with her and told me a few days before he died that he felt a deep connection with her. Barry also had a wonderful connection with Jenny's husband, Lazaro, and they talked on the phone often. Lazaro was a builder and did wonderful renovation work on our home. Barry especially loved the way Lazaro loved his daughter. When Barry and I married, Barry saw his role with my kids, Tamar, who was 14, and Dustin, 12, right back there behind me, as supporting me as their mother and building a relationship with them. When Tamar was 16, the three of us enrolled in a leadership seminar with the understanding that you would take on a project bigger than yourself. Barry asked Tamar to be his partner, and together they created a mentoring program for at-risk kids, founded on the idea that kids had just as much to contribute to the adults as vice versa. The program lasted for years and was hugely successful. All of the kids, most of whom had never been out of Dayton, Ohio, and several of the mentors flew to Washington, D.C. to accept an award from the National Network for Youth. I loved watching Barry and Tamar work on this in the loving and thoughtful way he acknowledged all of her ideas. As with most teenagers, it wasn't always smooth sailing. In Tamar's late teenage years, Barry and I decided to take her car away from her as a consequence for something none of us can remember. so she had to take the bus wherever she went. In Barry's mind, this was a big learning opportunity for Tamar. Barry loved cars, especially beautifully designed, well-performing sports cars. So taking a car away was a big consequence. A few weeks later, Barry and I hear a loud car pull into the driveway. Barry goes out to see Tamar in this huge boat of a car that she bought for $100. The front bumper was a 2x4. The front seat was held together with a water bed liner and duct tape. Barry went out, and I saw him looking under the car and assumed he was checking to see if it was leaking oil on his driveway. It takes a lot to get one over on Barry, but Tamar got her car back that day. And she sold the car back to the guy for $100. Barry has always said that Tamar is an old soul and much wiser than her years. He was very proud of her work as a therapist with children. Tamar lives in Yellow Springs and has been a wonderful support to us during COVID and the last 6 months of Barry's life. She continues to walk with me nearly every day, checking in to see how I'm doing. It's my favorite part of the day. Dustin. Dustin and Barry found happiness in different directions. Barry liked to read, meditate, journal, and have deep conversations. Dustin likes to dance, fish, ski, whitewater raft, scuba dive, skydive, and even rode a bull once. When Dustin was young, Barry developed a relationship with him around basketball and cars. Dustin loved Barry's cars and thought long and hard with his high school buddies how to take the Ferrari that Barry had wedged into the garage out for a drive. In the end, Dustin decided it was just too risky. When Dustin was 18, he went on a month-long wilderness experience with Outward Bound. He asked Barry if he had a journal he could have for the trip. Barry took great delight in that and all of the ways Dustin found to live life to the fullest. When Barry was dying, Dustin thanked him for being such a great dad, for bringing calm to the family where there had been chaos, and always loving us as we are. Olivia. Right there. Olivia is our oldest granddaughter, now 23, and beginning her doctoral program in San Diego. Barry and Olivia, then 12, decided they should open a restaurant called the O for Olivia and B for Barry restaurant. The O and B restaurant, but not the B-O restaurant. To prepare for that, they held a big dinner. They made the food, they invited all the family, friends, and Olivia's teachers. The 3 grandfathers were the waiters. There was a program after the dinner, and Olivia and Barry spoke, and then Olivia sang. It was so sweet. Olivia and Barry shared a spiritual connection that was extraordinary and very important to both of them. Barry encouraged Olivia's interest in everything spiritual and helped her feel it was okay and normal to be curious about spirituality. Corinne. Corinne is 16 and our youngest granddaughter. When she turned 13, Barry decided that we should have a rite of passage for her, and we invited her to come to California. The 3 of us talked about our lives, and Barry asked Corinne to complete the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. All of you, many of you have done this. He discussed each aspect with her telling her how special she was and that less than 1% of the population shares her personality traits. Barry and Corinne are both introverts, and Barry told her how important it is to honor and celebrate that part of her. He gave her a beautiful carved smiling monk as her birthday present. About 4 years ago, Barry asked the family to participate in a program he developed that would have us look as a family at life in a more thoughtful way. Barry would give us a book or a video, and then we would read or watch individually, and then twice a month we would have a conference call to discuss it, with questions like, what touched you the most deeply and why? Is there anything you will look at differently or change in your life as a result? The first topic was around finding bliss, and one of the kids named our group the Blisters. One of the books was called What's in the Way is the Way, and another was The Untethered Soul. We learned about healing old wounds and recognizing that it took 13.8 billion years for this exact moment to be happening, and we had almost no control of it. So all there is to do is to surrender to life and be grateful for the incredible gift of the moment. Blisters has gone on for several years. I hope he knows how life-changing that was and continues to be. I'm sure he does. Barry loves spending time reading with me from a book and sharing deeply. He liked when I would let go of the task, slow down, and just be present. He told me the story of plankton that serves such an essential role in the ocean, and the only thing plankton does is drift up to the surface and then drift back down. He gave me the earrings I am wearing today. He had them made. It symbolizes the ocean with an engraving on the back of one that says JD, Just Drift. The other says LB, Love Barry. Barry didn't care if you worshiped one God or many gods or no God at all. He didn't care what you did for a living. He only hoped it would give you joy and a sense of purpose. Barry wanted to know the essential self in each of us, what brought us despair, and what awakened us to the goodness and connection that we are all one. He believed deeply that forgiveness brought healing. During challenging times, I would ask him to hold me tight, and he would do the same. Barry was thankful for the love from his mother and father and for encouraging his curiosity about things they didn't even understand. He was thankful for his brothers and his family and his dogs, Namaste and Sophia. He was thankful for his work and any time someone he was with had an aha moment. He was thankful for his spiritual guides and books that moved him, fast and beautifully designed cars, heart-opening movies, the ocean, snow, spirals, monasteries and monks, autumn leaves, thunderstorms, jazz music, and the color yellow. He was thankful for the awe and wonder of the universe that he saw everywhere and in each of us. Barry died as he lived, with extraordinary kindness, gentleness, gratitude, and curiosity. His last words were, "I love you." Because of him, I know what it is to love and be loved, truly, madly, deeply.
Hi, I'm Papa's youngest granddaughter, Corinne. Papa was one of the smartest people that I know. He wrote 7 books, which you heard. His most recent was Noble Purpose. and I will have copies after the service for anyone who would like them.
Hi everybody, I'm Olivia. Just a little ad plan trying to get the instrumentals loaded on YouTube. And I apologize if you won't be able to hear the speaker from all the way back there, but I will do my best to project my voice so you can hear that.
My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with your heart. Your looks are laughable, unphotographable, yet you're my favorite work of art. Is your figure less than Greek? Is your mouth a little weak when you open it to speak? Are you smart? But don't change a hair for me. Not if you care for me. Stay, little Valentine. Stay. Each day is Valentine, my Valentine. Each day is Valentine. Each day is Valentine.
Well, I think not only Barry would be proud, I think Sarah Vaughn would be proud of that one. Thank you so much. Barry had 3 requests for the closing of their celebration of life. We all know that Barry made each of us feel like his best friend. He wanted to continue that relationship with each of us and asked that his ashes be available in small bottles for those who wanted them. That's not it. That's my Tylenol. If you need that, we'll make that available too. These are little vials of Barry's ashes, and they'll be up here on the memorial table here. So we asked that they be available for those who wanted them. So one of the monks at the Camaldolese Hermitage has Barry's ashes with him now on the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage in France and Spain. So Barry's already traveling the planet. And another friend is taking Barry to the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York. So they're on the table for you, along with his books. And please take one or both of these offerings if you would like to share in this. His second wish is that I read this poem from Pablo Neruda to Kipra. So I'm going to try and get through this one. When I die, I want your hands on my eyes. I want the light and wheat of your beloved hands to pass their freshness over me once more. I want to feel the softness that changed my destiny. I want you to live while I wait for you asleep. I want your ears to hear the wind. I want you to sniff the sea's aroma that we love together. To continue to walk on the sand we walk on. I want what I love to continue to live, and you whom I love and sang, above all else, to continue to flourish full flower, so that you can reach everything my love directs you to, so that my shadow can travel along with you in your hair. So that everything can learn the reason for my song. Sorry. So that reading was for Kipra. I'd like to read that last part again for each of us here today, because I know Barry would mean this for all of us. And if you wish, you might close your eyes and imagine Barry reading this to you. I want you to live while I wait for you asleep. I want your ears to hear the wind. I want you to sniff the sea's aroma that we love together. To continue to walk on the sand we walk on. I want what I love to continue to live, and you whom I love and sang above all else to continue to flourish full flower, so that you can reach everything my love directs you to, so that my shadow can travel along in your hair, so that everything can learn the reason for my song. We conclude our celebration with Barry's third request. He wanted us to share a glass of wine and COVID-friendly food as we swap stories with each other and listen to some of his favorite music. I'm quite certain that Barry would want to thank each and every one of you for coming today and for your contributions to his very well-loved and well-lived life. Thank you.